Hello. Yeah, perfect, it's working. Good evening, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here in Little Rock. I've had quite a journey in the United States, and I'm ending it tonight with you guys, and I think this will be the most comfortable audience. It was quite nerve-wracking speaking to former world leaders and whatnot. So I start tonight's talk by, first of all, I heard that Little Rock is well known for storytelling. So I've decided to make my little presentation a story about my journey through art. So I'm going to show you my earliest work till my latest projects. And within those, you'll hear a little bit about my life and my journey. So the identity and disappearance of the Saudi woman. It's a very serious title, I know. But in reality, most of my work focuses on this. This is sort of the underlying theme that I always address when I approach projects, because women have not been documented historically in my country, in a lot of countries, and the people who wrote history wrote it the way they wanted it to be written. And today there's encouragement of covering a woman's face, lowering her voice, not saying her name, and I feel this instigates forgetting and disappearance. So, starting, this way. So this is just a general slide to give you an idea of what kind of mediums I work in my art. And it's photography, installation art, and I also work with neon and LED lights. My black and white prints some of them are exhibited here at the Clinton Library, but I have a much larger body of work that's much crazier and much harder to install than photographs. This is the collection that's actually now being exhibited in Little Rock, and I'm so happy that it's here, and it's part of a session that was held about women's empowerment, and it's a series titled I Am. In 2005, our current king took the throne, and part of his speech, he gave a sort of very hopeful talk about women and men both are going to come together and build this country. And at that point, we had a really bad period of women's rights, and especially in employment, with 3% of women working in the workforce. So I got very excited, a lot of women did. And after his speech, a dialogue broke out with journalists and opinion leaders about, no, women are not going to work all over the place. There's going to be jobs that suit her nature that she's going to work in. And it got me thinking, what suits my nature as a woman, and who decides what suits my nature? So I looked around me and found many women, Saudi women, that were working in very interesting jobs, and I thought they would be inspirational and sort of a trigger of thought of, yeah, you can do this and you can do that. So there's no limited ideas of what women can do. It's a larger body of work, but tonight I think I have 3 samples. I am an educator, she's a professor, and what's written on the board is, ignorance is darkness. I am a petroleum engineer, and I am a doctor. Now, obviously the petroleum engineer does not go to work wearing this much jewelry. This is antique pieces, and I'm sort of discussing the idea of tradition and religion, and when you mix them up together, you cannot really discuss traditions if they've got the guise of religion. It becomes untouchable as a subject. And traditions, although they're very beautiful and belong within our identity, once placed in the wrong place, are not suitable. I concluded the whole collection with I am a Saudi citizen, where I actually make a very obvious statement that I want to belong to this landscape, I want to belong to this society. Another collection I worked on was titled The Choice, and it addresses a lot of things. These are very early collections, so I was quite vocal. I was very young, and I wanted to get everything that was in my head was going to come out in my art. And one of them was women in driving. As you know, women do not drive in Saudi Arabia. It has no religious basis. It's a social issue that I think we're the only country that women don't drive. So transportation has become an issue, especially now that there's a huge drive for women to start working and join the workforce. But how do women get to their jobs if they cannot drive? So most of their income goes into hiring drivers, paying buses, and whatnot. I also address political involvement, sports. As you know, there was the Olympics this year. There's a big drama about Saudi women joining the Olympic team. Political participation. I think this is a contemporary photo, but right now in Saudi, we have a statement by the king this year that women will participate in 2015. So it might be a historical photo, I hope, not a contemporary one anymore. Then I moved on to a residency with the Delfina Foundation, which are basically a foundation that gives residencies to Middle Eastern artists to come into London and work and produce art. And within this residency in London, I was exposed to a lot of the pop art movement. And pop art movement, they were just showing them all over the museums at that time. It's not that it's the first time I see it, but you interact with the artworks. And actually, I saw a lot of pop art this trip in Houston, Texas, for some reason. But anyway, what does pop art do? It takes a newspaper clipping, removes it from its context, and then places it in a completely different context and creates a story. And for me, I use that with photographs that I found in newspapers for about a year. Me and my mother would find these articles that talked about so-and-so woman won an award. So-and-so woman went to a conference. So-and-so woman donated money to a charity. And they would always use the same image, which is the black ghosts. The ones that have zero faces, zero character. And it wasn't that they did multiple pictures of these ghosts. They just used the same one. They didn't even bother shooting different pictures of these black ghosts. So I started, it became like a little competition. Oh, I found one, Mama. And then she would find one the week after, and we would collect them. And I decided to bring these women that have been in our lives for about a year in our newspapers and put them in my art. And you see them sort of walking across the landscapes. And this is called Landscapes of the Mind. Up there, you'll see two doves. They're not very clear, but I started using them for the first time. And I'm just mentioning this because you'll see their progression in my art. The doves made an appearance in this collection, and they have a little line going through their neck. Because during primary school and elementary school, in my art class, we were not allowed to draw anything that has life. So they would, if I were to draw something like a camel or a bird, you'd have to draw a line because you don't want to imitate God and his creation. And I found that very strange. Eventually, by the time I finished high school, we were not even allowed to draw anything that had life. So it was always landscape and the moon setting and the sun rising, and it became very boring. So it left an impact on me, and I included it within this photograph. I later on went to another residency in Dubai, and that was my move to a city in the Arab world. And it was very strange to be in a city format within the Arab world. And I produced a collection that was very city-based. Neon lights. There's a lot of isolation in cities where you're surrounded by concrete. And I created this collection. I shot it in Saudi, but I put it together in Dubai. Most of the pictures were shot from a moving car, so I called it drive-by shootings. And I went on building rooftops and shot from there, and sort of put together these images where I started to create a little imaginary story of a relationship between the city and its inhabitants. And they used to be in love, but the relationship was going through very hard times. And they're having a little conversation. And the inhabitants would ask the city, do you share my dreams? And of course, the city doesn't answer. This is another photograph from a rooftop, and it says strictly families only, because we have a lot of spaces that are defined for families, and a space defined for single men, and a space defined for women only. And this kind of spaces is self-imposed isolation, which I felt, who needs that new layer of isolation? And then, of course, if you think about it in the broader sense, Islamophobia has created isolation among countries, borders, and sectarianism has separated people that once lived together. And this is sort of the ideas that are playing within the landscape I belong to. One of the neon works, part of the conversation, and we were speaking to each other through silence. This is also part of the collection of And We Had No Shared Dreams. But I brought it here because, first of all, when I went into my residency, I arrived right after resident artists were leaving. And these artists were from New York. They were graffiti artists that started the 80s movement of graffiti. Their names were Futura 2000 and Stash. I loved them. I followed them as a child, and I was so excited to come in to find their spray paint left over. They had massacred the gallery walls. And of course, spray paint, when you spray it on white walls, it's impossible to remove it. You have to remove the whole wall. You cannot paint over it. So Futura has a technique where graffiti artists, when they paint, they spray, the nozzle gets clogged up. So what they do is they turn over the spray can, hit it on the floor, let the paint out, and then go back to spray painting. When you hit it on the floor, it creates a little feather effect. And he uses this in his art. So I sort of was inspired by his technique and added the feather technique to this artwork. You also see the dove making a second appearance in this collection. But this time, it has on its body a certain document. And this document is the permission slip that every woman in Saudi Arabia needs to get from her male guardian in order to travel. My male guardian is my youngest brother. And I placed it on the body of the dove and drew a line across the neck again. So then this dove moved on to a much larger project. So this is the document that I use, and this is the one that I cannot travel unless I have. And it's signed by my little brother, who I changed his diapers when he was a baby. And he's the one who decides if I go or not. But of course, he's very scared of me. He would never. And I placed it on a fiberglass dove. And then invited I sent an email out to a few women and asked them, would you like to donate your travel slips for an art project? At that point, I was not very well known in Saudi Arabia, so I expected nobody would respond and give me such a delicate document with their information. And I was shocked to have almost 100 women donate their travel documents to go to this project because it was a statement they wanted to participate in. So I created this artwork. It was shown in Dubai and again in the Venice Biennale. Now, a lot of people ask me, is there any controversy around this? Has it caused something in Saudi? And in reality, nobody wants to bring this artwork to Saudi Arabia because they're scared of shipping it into the country. But at the same time this artwork was shown, the in-flight magazine of the Saudi Arabian Airlines ran a 4-page article about this artwork with the dove displayed all across the pages. So it sort of tests my mindset about what do I think is okay to discuss and how closed is my society, and am I drawing these lines and assumptions from my own self-censorship, let's say. There is maybe a time where we are in a time where we can actually have dialogue and discussion about these social issues. There's rules that don't make sense to us. It's more pictures of this installation. So you have some sitting and eating on the floor, some hanging out on the sides, and some floating in the sky. So in reality, what I was trying to sort of formulate is that Saudi women, when you look at them, you think they look like doves, they're floating in the sky, they're amazing, but in reality, they're suspended. Then I turned back to my black and white photography again. And because I wanted to have a journey of nostalgia, my father had passed away 2 years ago, and I've been playing with this idea of revisiting his memories. He had Alzheimer's for about 7 years before he passed away, so I never got the chance to really have conversations with him about his life, his journey. My father is a Bedouin, but he joined the oil company and built a whole life because of oil. And we're here, me and my sisters, because of his journey. So I couldn't get the details of what did you do, what did you eat, what did you think at that age when you were in Saudi? So I decided to have a journey and talk to all his peers that had the same journey as he did. and interview them and find out his story through a collective memory of a larger group. Another thing is I wanted to do portraits of these people, but I decided not to do, the typical, I'm going to photograph your face portrait. And I drew inspiration from stuff that my father left behind. He had pens, mugs, and oil samples that he was given as a student in the oil company. Things that didn't mean anything to me when he was around. And when he left, they became so valuable. Me and my siblings would fight over these bottles. There were 5, and these are 4, so my mom keeps them because it will not be split up. So these objects carried so many stories, a lifetime of stories, and I decided this is how I'm going to do the portraits of these oil men and women. This is just a snapshot. It's a larger collection. So, for example, the one up there is called Bedr's camera. Bedr was a Palestinian who left Palestine in 1948 when the Israeli occupation basically caused a mass exodus of Palestinians because of their occupation. And he became later a Saudi citizen and executive oil man. His prized possession was a box full of photographs with a camera sitting on top of it. Camera, pristine condition, only used for that period, for those photographs. And there are pictures of his home and his childhood and his family and friends in Palestine. Of course, all of this does not exist anymore. And only he can relate to these pictures with the memory sense. His children look at them and have zero connection to it. This picture is by a geologist. He came into Saudi Arabia and explored the whole country looking for oil. He came into very rural areas, dug wells, water wells to start off, because that's how you start a camp. You dig and get water, and then you start looking for oil. Because the water was dug, all the Bedouins would come and drink from it. They bring their camels, their sheep, and he has an amazing archive of early Saudi life of Bedouin. These are 2 Bedouin children that were just giggling. They've never seen a camera, let alone a geologist with the hat and the little vest. He's a romantic. When he married his wife, a beautiful Saudi woman, he took her on a road trip following the tap line, the oil tap line. And those days, Saudi Arabia had no rest stops, no showers, no food, nothing. Just a Land Rover and a couple of blankets. And they toured all of Saudi Arabia, and that's how they fell in love and got to know Saudi Arabia at the same time. The picture down there is of it's called the oil family. It's Hamad and Madawi, his wife. This picture is a little story. Hamad and Madawi married at the age of 19. He had to leave her to study in the United States. He later on brought her overnight from a rural Bedouin area in Saudi called Al Qasim to New York. And she had 2 long braids. And the first thing he did is he took her to a hairdresser's and told them, make her look American. And what did they do? They chopped off her braids. And she cried for 3 days straight because braids were a symbol of beauty for the Bedouins. And she didn't speak English, so she couldn't protest. But generally speaking, they spent their whole life in America, most of it in Houston, Texas. He was the head of the Houston offices for the largest oil company in the world. And he raised his children in America. And then you see his hard hat, which was the oil company that actually provided this kind of life for him. And all his children work in oil. All his brothers work in oil. This photograph is of an oil woman. Her name is Munira. And in this project, I did a lot of personal interviews, video interviews, and I asked them almost the same questions throughout. I asked a common question was, what was the toughest times for you, and what were the happiest times? And almost everyone answered the happiest times were college days, which still exist till this day. College days are the best days. So I added her photograph in her university in Beirut, where she was on a scholarship from the Saudi government. And then a photograph of her passport when she had to come back to Saudi and she wore the veil and how awkward she looks. This is a 10-year award that she received, among many awards. Munira basically came back with a degree in social studies. At that point, the oil company was run by Americans. She had come in and said, I want to open a social services section within the hospital for mental and social work. And the Americans that were running the oil company said, no, the Saudis that work here, most important for us is that they are immunized, and stay healthy to work. That's it. There was no concern about the social work. And that was the attitude then. And this makes you think about the different changes where now we have Asian workers, and it's changed to that level. And it will continue within civilization where people will always look down at the worker level. But she actually eventually opened her social services section and worked in it for about 30 years. These are some of the interviews that I ran. This is one of the oil men, Saud al-Ashkar, who actually was a Bedouin as a child. He herded goats, sheep at the age of 8. There was a huge drought in Saudi Arabia, and his father made him cross one of the largest deserts in Saudi Arabia at the age of 8 with water and dates because the sheep would have died if they had stayed there. And he took them across the desert, was able to sell some of them, and actually have some money for their family. He later on became the head of international operations of the largest oil company in the world. In his story, you can tell how young our country is. And within this generation that I was interviewing, there are people that saw extreme poverty and extreme wealth. And that's the story that I wanted to encapsulate. And it brings you sort of to reality of how young Saudi Arabia is and the expectations of the world from this very, very young country. Muna, down here, is a pioneer woman, also an oil woman. She had scored #1 on all the students when she graduated from high school in grades. And at that point, King Faisal had announced that the top 10 would be sent on scholarships. So she went to the ministry and said, yeah, I'm #1. I'm going on a scholarship to America. And they said, no, 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 it's only for boys. So what she did is she packed her bag and asked, where is King Faisal right now? And King Faisal used to spend summers in Taif, which is a cooler area in Saudi. And she went to his palace. She walked in and asked to talk to him, and he was very accessible as a king. King Faisal is a very beloved king. And she walked in. So this is how she describes the story in her interview. She walks into a huge hall, and the first chair she saw, she sat in it. King Faisal, from very far away, said, listen, I'm an old man, and if you're going to sit over there, I'm not going to hear you. So you have to move closer. And she did, and she told him, I'm the first. He says, I know. And he said, I want to go on my scholarship. And he said, then we'll make that happen. And he decreed. And after her, many women went off to scholarships because of her little visit to the king. Then I decided to do another participatory project. I decided I need more people to get involved in my artworks in a different way. My name. There's a phenomena in Saudi Arabia right now. It's fairly new, where it's not something that comes from traditions. Young men will not say the names of their wives, mothers, daughters in front of other men. It's something that they want to hide, and it's shameful to pronounce it. So they would call their wives my family, or the madame, or any other thing, but not the name. Young children, boys, bully each other by finding out the names of their mother, the mothers of other students, writing it on the blackboard and feeling very ashamed. Little boys would sort of want to leave the school because of that. So I thought, this can't be right. First of all, there's no basis of it in religion because the Quran names names of women. The Prophet Muhammad actually says the names of his wives in a lot of his recitals, and anybody who would ask him questions, he would pronounce his wife's names, his daughters. Then I thought maybe it's the Bedouins. You know, they always have this very conservative culture. But in reality, an example of Bedouins being very proud of women in their lives. King Abdulaziz, the founding king of Saudi Arabia, is a Bedouin. And he's known that when he got upset, he would say, and I am the brother of Noura, I will do this and this. And Bedouins are known to identify each other through mothers' names because they're basically one family. The fathers all have the same last name, so it's usually the mothers are the ones that identify who they are. So I decided to go on the journey of building. I used prayer beads. I was inspired by prayer beads because they're a source of patience. Women use them. They're very patient. And I went and talked to women that work in artifacts of weaving, which is something that's dying out in Saudi Arabia. These Bedouins used to build tents and thrive from building these, working in this form of art. But because they've been urbanized, they've gone under the poverty line. There are huge initiatives in the country to bring back their craftsmanship and give them an income. So I decided, why not work with these women in the contemporary art format? So they don't stay traditional. They can actually be in the contemporary world of art. So I invited these women to come in also to work with me. And then I just posted on my website, do you want to be part of my artwork? I put it up on Facebook and waited. I thought maybe, just like Suspended Together, 100 women will respond. That's very good. But in reality, 400 women across the kingdom responded and registered. So it was an overwhelming response. I didn't know what to do with all these women. I only had space for 300. I also started a whole Twitter thing where women of Riyadh and Jeddah make a statement. We will not allow the Saudi woman's name to be erased, replaced, nor become a source of shame. I'm coming to Riyadh on Saturday, come. And that was the invite. Then all these organizations heard about this project and started donating spaces to me. So women's organizations and universities gave me spaces. Shipping companies came out to ship all my stuff for free. My tickets were paid for, along with my volunteer assistants. So I decided if I'm going to have that many women around, we're going to have a talk. It's not going to be just art. And we started discussing the subject of why aren't boys pronouncing your names? And who can fix this? Who can address this? Nobody else except the women themselves. And it was such a common and very obvious logic, but you just needed it to be sort of brought up. And awareness of some subjects sometimes makes you more active about stopping it. So we had a little conversation, and then I invited them to go in. I explained to them that this artwork is going to tour the world. You're going to write your full name on a piece of bead with your own handwriting, full name, and it will be displayed. And we're going to be very proud of displaying these artworks. So, women from all over Saudi. So I started a tour from the east to the west, and I stopped in 3 major cities. They started writing their names on these beads. Friends all gathered and did it together. They were putting out Facebook, Twitter, they were taking pictures together. These are women in Riyadh, in Jeddah. There are sisters that came together to do it. Mothers and daughters. I even had fathers participate by writing their baby daughters' names on their behalf, because they're very proud of their daughters' names. I had my personal celebrities in Saudi Arabia. These are very well-known activists and celebrities. And then there are some Saudi women that live all over the world, and they started DHLing their beads from New York, London, wherever. Then for some reason, this is not my doing, but women that were not Saudi and did not have this problem in their society started tweeting that they want to be part of this project by pronouncing their names. So you had a Spanish woman, Elisa Hernando. If you're a female, introduce your name and support women's voices. And all these women started typing their names even when they weren't in the workshops with me. Then the press picked up on it, and this is my Hollywood pose, as you can see. Please forgive me for that. But they started putting these images, and if you remember the images that I started off with, the black ghosts, and this is completely the opposite of the black ghosts. So there was sort of a shift in mindset when they actually believed in the activity that was happening. This is also another photograph that appeared in an English Arab News, which is an English daily in the Middle East. Then I invited the Bedouin women to come over to my house, and we put the beads together. They stayed with me for about 4 days, working on it, and they also participated in writing their names on the beads. And then finally, they were displayed in Jeddah. What was fascinating is that there was a platform created for these women when I was doing this artwork. They all gathered together and we had a little conversation, and then we collectively decided, you know what? We agree that this is a bad thing, and we agree to do something different about it. I found the atmosphere in the room of those workshops across Saudi, it's very positive, and it was so energetic that, fine, we're done with the beads, and you know, when you're like, oh, clap, well done, you can go home now. Nobody would leave the room. I'd be like, oh, auntie, you know, it's done, we're packing up. Like, it's okay, we'll just stay here. And they would stay till the very last second. When we switched off the lights, they would walk out with me. So there was this wonderful energy in participatory art. And this is where art connects with the general society. And it's not on the wall in an exclusive sort of atmosphere. And these are more of the beads. And I thank you today for listening to me. I hope this was very knowledgeable. Thank you. Like this? Okay.
For some questions, if you raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm supposed to hold on.
That one's yours, yes.
I have two questions. In your artwork, the women's faces are covered, half covered. Was that an artistic decision, or was that a political decision, you know, that of keeping them safe? And have there been any repercussions, political repercussions, to you or to the women who participated?
Many of the women I photographed are quite well-known women in our society, especially filmmakers, the petroleum engineers. There's little celebrities in a way. And they really didn't want to have their face covered. They wanted to show everything. And I told them, it's not about you. It's about my art project, so you need to relax and listen to what I want to do. And so it was an artistic decision in reality, but I've photographed women with their full face showing, and it wasn't an issue. Political repercussions, there wasn't any. Actually, the first time I showed this collection was in Riyadh, and it was inaugurated by our foreign minister and the British foreign minister. And I walked Prince Saud Al Faisal through the artworks, and we came to the steering wheel photograph, and he asked me, and so what is this about? I was like, obviously. And he said, yes, I understand, I know, and it's like soon. But in reality, there hasn't been any really negative reactions to my artwork. And I always say, a lot of journalists ask me, have you ever been censored? This is the favorite question of everybody. And I haven't. And I always say, I wish I was, because usually an artist that gets censored immediately becomes a star. And that hasn't happened to me yet. Actually, it's been accepted. It's been shown in all newspapers, the whole collection. Every artwork I've ever produced has received amazing support in my country. And it only makes you think about what kind of dialogue is happening on the real ground, not the stereotypes that you hear in media about Saudi Arabia.
Yes, sir. Mayor Hayes, yes.
Thank you, and we're certainly glad you're here. One of the things, being a lawyer, I kind of want to go behind what the answers are. And when the answers are something like, what is my name? And the basis is not in the Quran. And, you know, do you go a step further and find out where did that start? And if so, why? And if there's not a reason, why not change? So those things aren't based in religion. How are they defended?
Well, I actually put together a survey during all my workshops, and I asked these specific questions. Out of 400 women, there was not a single one that gave an answer. There was just random questions like society, tradition. I personally have an opinion, and I don't know if it's correct, but you cannot really pinpoint a reason. But I think it stems from the idea of covering the face, lowering the voice, hiding the name.
This is based in religion, then is there any historical context for it? Just simply, it had to start sometime, somewhere, somehow, and and it's just unknown?
I actually had a lot of conversations with other nationalities. After this artwork was shown, I had friends from Iran say that they've had this tradition happen within their social, but it's gone now. This is very old. It's sort of spreading in the UAE and within Saudi culture. So it's a very sort of new cultural phenomena, and nobody understands it. And actually, nobody didn't comment about it because it wasn't so obvious. It just happened, and people were just like, it sounds weird, but I'm not going to talk about it. But once it was highlighted, it became sort of a dialogue. I hope it changes.
Yes, ma'am.
I ran into this with a friend who was 25 when I got to know him when he came here with an international visitors program. And after he left, he married his 15-year-old promised bride from another tribal area near the border of Afghanistan. And it was 2 years before he told me her name. And I tried to get it out of him, and he said he couldn't speak her name to anyone until they got married. And then after that it was a protective device. It was, like you said, like the veil. It was protection for women to not have their names all over the public and all over emails and who knows where. He really saw it as a very good thing, and I don't know how she felt about it. She's learning English, but we aren't communicating quite yet.
Yeah.
I'm Iranian.
That's fine.
I'm Iranian. Culturally, from Iranian perspective, I could just say I don't want to interrupt at all to mention their Arabic culture, but for a guy to mention a woman's name when they're not married, that taints that woman's reputation. So I think for him was that he wanted to make sure that he doesn't taint her reputation if they don't end up together. It's a cultural thing.
Do you want to say anything? Yeah.
Hi, thanks for being here. Your photos are beautiful. I was just noticing that you had a lot of social media usage, and you said you got a lot of response, even surprising amount of response. Has anyone suggested future participatory art projects, or are you going to keep doing those? They seem to be really successful. I don't know if you can tell us what they'll be, but maybe some ideas for that, or if people have suggested any.
You mean, has anybody suggested that I do? No, I don't take suggestions. I actually look for the projects that I really believe in, and I can see them through with total dedication. I am planning another participatory project, but I cannot announce it tonight. But maybe if you invite me to Little Rock next year, we can talk about it again.
You're welcome anytime. Any other questions? Yes.
Could you elaborate on the guardianship from the male side and the fact that your youngest brother can have that right over you, for the guardianship for you? Into what are other things aside from giving you the permission to exit the country? What are other things that they have to give you the permission for?
Actually, I think I might do a project on this because I'm not sure how many things there is, but women cannot get employed without the permission of a guardian, cannot open a business without the permission of a guardian, cannot do surgery without permission of a guardian. Travel was one. It's just a bunch of them. I can't really recite all of them, but if you Google it, you'll find a lot of people have written articles about this.
Right here.
It's just to leave the borders of Saudi, and that's it. But within the kingdom, I can travel, stay in hotels, do what I want. And once I'm outside, I can do that. There's a huge dialogue in Saudi about this issue anyway, so it's not, it's a done deal, that's it.
What do you think will spark a change in that, that there's guardianship over females? Do you think it'll be a slow change to add one or two things, or do you think something will spark to where there's a big change in the culture?
What will spark change? I don't know what will spark change in Saudi, but what I believe in, what sparks change is dialogue. Once you start talking about an issue and become aware of it and have conversations with this person, conversations with that person, then things can reach a level where it's discussed at a higher level and maybe change at that point can happen. And I've been asked, do you think your art is going to change the world or change the situation of women? And in reality, my art is not made as a statement for women. It's a sort of a personal statement of mine. It's a reflection of my life, of the challenges I face, of issues that I think about, and I just put them down in my art. This is how I express myself. I'm not a poet, I'm not a writer, so this is how you're going to see my ideas. Will art change things? I doubt it. I think art can create dialogue, and that could maybe lead to change. But art, I don't think is that, for me, in my work, I don't think it's that powerful.
I'd love the way you're portraying women in a new way. You're challenging the cultural view of women. But for that to change, you also have to change the cultural view of men. I'm wondering if you've ever thought about using male models and challenging them to do things as non-traditional as you are the women models that you're using.
The culture of men, that was a topic of my lunch today. Changing culture, and it was actually the culture of men in America that we were talking about, and how in America people actually say we're fine with women's rights, and you know, we've got women on our boards, and in reality there's sort of a culture where fine, we have one woman on the board, hopefully she doesn't make too much noise, and she lets everything go. And that was just the conversation, it wasn't me saying this. So it got, the whole conversation started about, you know, putting quotas on governments and on boardrooms. The culture of men. I don't photograph men only because they're not of my concern right now. They're not my top priority. I'm a woman, so everything I think about and address, and I find challenges in my life, do not involve them. But I do, this is my recent projects. I did have men write on the beads, so that's quite an improvement. I haven't completely left them out. But you never know. The oil men, of course, are a different story. I let them into the project because it was about my father and it was about the stories. But to address their problems or their issues, I think we have more problems than they do.
Hold on one second, let's get the microphone so everyone can hear you.
I didn't mean to say that it was about men's issues, but to say that for your women to become more progressive, the men are going to have to become more,
Absolutely.
they're going to have
Yes.
to change, and to photograph men in a new role as well as the women in a new role in support of the same thing.
I go back to saying my art is not about changing people. It's sort of I express myself. I'm sort of like a mirror of what I see. If change happens, I'll go document it. I'll have interviews with these men, but right now, I can't change a lot of things.
Amy? Here it comes.
When you had the beads, the pictures of the people painting the beads, you had a father with a baby girl. And you said, and some of the men came out, and of course they are so proud of their daughters. Do you see, is there something that happens at some point in the aging of the daughters where they go from being young men who want to show off the daughter to men who want to hide what the daughter becomes? And if so, what is that transformation stage? I mean, can you identify or articulate it? And is that a pressure point that could be modified?
For me, in my personal life, this does not happen. And so I cannot comment about everybody else in the whole of the Arab world or the Muslim world. I cannot. I have a theory, which is I think that a girl, when she's young, she's innocent. And then when she reaches a certain age, she becomes sexualized. She becomes a body, she becomes childbearing, becomes an object of attraction for males. And that's the reason why, at a certain point, women move from the innocence to, we have to protect her, we have to cover her, or she could be a source of shame or to the tribe or family. But I cannot express that a lot in my art because I did not experience it.
One second.
Are you saying you never had the transformation where your father stopped being proud and letting you be out in public? Or why when you say you did not, what was your experience?
The men in my family did not think that way. They allowed me and my sisters to become very educated, work, speak in public. This was not part of our culture in the family, but I know it exists. I'm not ignorant to that.
Anyone else? Well, thank you so much for coming to Little Rock finally and opening the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out, and have a happy holidays.